NBA Finals game, surrounded by giants and legends, a skinny guy with braids barely 6 feet tall stands in front of Tyronn Lue, breaks him with a killer move, and after sinking the shot, steps over him. Literally steps over him and doesn't apologize. He looks at him, ignores him, and keeps going. That gesture, that moment frozen in history, was more than just a play. It was a statement. It was Allen Iverson screaming to the world that he didn't need anyone's permission to rule. But how the hell did he get there? How did a guy who didn't practice, who showed up late, who ate burgers in the locker room and hid in the bathroom to avoid the gym, end up humiliating stars like Jordan, Shaq, or Kobe? This is the story of a player who refused to train and still destroyed them all anyway. And yes, we're going to talk about practice, just not the way you think. Allen Iverson was born in Hampton, Virginia, right in the middle of a cosmic mess. His house was literally built over a sewage line, the floor would flood with actual shit, and the poverty was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Raised by a 15-year-old teenage mom, no father figure, constant power outages, no heating, no hot water, the guy started life in extreme survival mode. The only constants in his childhood were screaming, violence, and jail visits. His stepfather, Michael Freeman, spent more time inside the prison system than out, and it didn't take long for Allen to realize that if he didn't outrun the chaos would swallow him whole. One time, after visiting Freeman in prison, Allen took off his sneakers and gave them to him, then walked home barefoot. Because yeah, he was a kid from the absolute bottom, but he was already showing a loyalty that didn't belong to this world. While anyone else might have broken, he used all that mud as fuel. As he once said, "I came up with nothing. That's why I learned to fight for everything." And here comes the most ironic part of this whole story. Iverson didn't even want to play basketball. His thing was football. He was the best quarterback in the state, a 5-star prospect, and he also played safety because the kid was a machine, breaking bones and dodging tackles. His arms were like wires, but his head could take any hit. Basketball? He saw it as softer, as a less manly sport, until his mom, Ann, bought him a pair of Jordan sneakers and told him, "You're going to practice whether you like it or not." He cried. He literally cried because he didn't want to go, but she made him. And that day on a little court with his football teammates, something changed. He realized that in basketball you could fight too, that you could humiliate someone with a crossover instead of a tackle, and that the applause sounded just as loud. That was the seed. From that moment on, Allen Iverson understood he had a way out of the mess, not with an oval ball, but with an orange one, and even though he didn't know it yet, he had just stepped onto a path that would make him a legend. Valentine's Day, 1993. Instead of making out with some girl, Allen Iverson was at a bowling alley with his friends, a regular night out for any teenager, until chaos exploded. An argument, a racist slur, someone called him boy and dropped the N-word, and suddenly chairs were flying. Iverson swears he didn't throw a single one, that they pulled him out before the fight broke out, that he was just a witness, but it didn't matter. There was one thing he did throw, his fame. In Hampton, he was already a star, the black kid everyone knew, and that made him an easy target for the justice system. Only 4 people were arrested, all of them black. Iverson was sentenced to 15 years in prison, 15, for an incident where no one even ended up in the hospital. You know what that was? A symbolic hunt, a cautionary punishment. He was 17, but they delayed the trial until he turned 18 so they could try him as an adult. A dirty, disgusting move reeking of institutional revenge. There, in Newport News prison, locked up with men already broken by the system, Allen thought his career was over before it even began, but it was also there where he started to understand his own resilience. Older inmates protected him, advised him, and looked out for him. They told him, "You're getting out of here and you're going to do something big." Spoiler, they weren't wrong. When all seemed lost, the only man with the balls to back him up stepped in. John Thompson, the legendary Georgetown coach, a human tank with the authority of a general and the heart of a father. Ann Iverson, desperate, begged him to give her son a chance, and Thompson didn't just say yes, he went and pulled him out of jail with a scholarship. That gesture was more than a sports rescue, it was a protective shield. "If anyone comes for him, they'll have to go through me first," Thompson said. That's how one of the deepest and most symbolic relationships in sports was born. At Georgetown, Allen was still a raw diamond, but he was hungry, and more than anything, he had an emotional engine no one could shut down. In his first year, he lit up the NCAA with his defense and speed. By the second, he was unstoppable. They called him the answer. Because when you didn't know what to do on the court, the answer was to give the ball to Iverson. But the pressure wasn't just on the court. His little sister was seriously ill and the family couldn't afford the treatment. So Allen did what no one wanted him to do. He left college early, not out of ambition, but out of necessity. The kid who had barely gotten out of jail was now betting everything to save his family. 1996, a historic draft, Kobe, Nash, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, but the number 1 pick went to Philadelphia, and they chose the smallest guy in the group, 6 feet tall, 165 pounds, soaking wet. No one that light had ever been drafted first overall, but the moment he stepped on the court, the debate was over. In his debut, he dropped 30 points. Then he broke Wilt Chamberlain's rookie record for most consecutive 40-point games. 40, like it was nothing. But the moment that elevated him to Olympus came in March of '97 when he faced his idol, Michael Jordan. Just imagine, you're a rookie, and across from you is the man who ruled your entire childhood. But Iverson didn't back down. He hit him with his now legendary double crossover and made him stumble. Jordan glitched, Iverson nailed the jumper, the arena erupted, and in that exact moment, the world knew there was a new sheriff in town. That year, he averaged 23.5 points, was named Rookie of the Year, and made 155 threes, but the Sixers were a mess, barely winning anything. So they brought in someone to restore order, Larry Brown, and that's where the real holy war between talent and discipline began. Larry Brown was obsessed with discipline. A coach who showed up 20 minutes early to everything and expected the same from his players. The guy was a broken record about basketball being a team game, constantly yelling about bad passes and basically living in the gym. And then there was Allen Iverson. The complete opposite of all that. He skipped practices, showed up late, and when he did come, he slacked off. Literally, he'd hide in the bathroom, pretend to lift weights, eat junk food lying on the treatment table. It was like throwing gas on a fire in the locker room. Brown was losing his mind. What's the point of one guy taking every shot if the other 4 never touched the ball? The relationship was so toxic they almost came to blows more than once. Allen couldn't stand being treated like a child. Larry couldn't stand that his star player was a ticking time bomb. Things exploded when Iverson got suspended for missing practice without notice. The media tore him apart, and Brown went to management with a clear threat. Either you trade him, or I quit. The result? The Sixers tried to pull off a blockbuster trade with the Pistons. Everything was agreed upon, but at the last second, a role player refused to waive his clause, and the whole deal fell through. That was the turning point. Allen realized he wasn't untouchable, that he was self-sabotaging, and that's when the story flipped. After almost getting kicked off his own team, Iverson swallowed his ego. He sat down with Brown and said, "I'm ready to be the captain, to be a leader. I want to be like Magic with Pat Riley, like Jordan with Phil." Larry couldn't believe it. And for the first time, they started rowing in the same direction. Training camp was a whole different story. Iverson didn't miss a single day, bulked up to take more hits. He went from 155 to 172 pounds, and the most surprising part, he started passing the ball. He was no longer just the lone gunslinger, he started trusting his teammates, reading double teams, and spreading energy. The 2000 to 2001 season was pure madness. The Sixers started with 10 straight wins. Iverson was on fire. 31 points per game, 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals, and a kind of leadership no one saw coming. He was the MVP of the All-Star game, lifted the trophy with tears in his eyes and shouted, "Where's my coach? Where's Coach Brown?"
Where's my coach? Where's my coach? Coach Brown. Is he around?
A full circle redemption moment, the problem kid had become the emotional engine of the team, and the best part was still to come. With Iverson on fire and a team built to defend like rabid dogs, the Sixers clinched the top seed in the East. It was the first time that had happened since the days of Moses Malone. And yeah, they had defensive beasts like Dikembe Mutombo, who won Defensive Player of the Year, Aaron McKie, Sixth Man of the Year, and Coach of the Year also went to Philly. But the soul of the team was just one person, Allen. In the playoffs, they started climbing. First, they swept Indiana. Then came the holy war against Vince Carter, a roller coaster series with both guys trading 50-point games. In Game 7, with Vince exhausted after flying to his college graduation that same morning, Iverson shot terribly but handed out 16 assists. Yes, the same kid who once wouldn't even look at his teammates. Next came Milwaukee and Ray Allen, and that's when Iverson played with a literally broken hip. Even so, he dropped 46 in one game, 44 in another, and dragged the Sixers to their first finals in 18 years. All with a team where the second highest scorer didn't even average 12 points per game. You heard that right, 12. It was him against the world, and the world was the undefeated Lakers of Shaq and Kobe. NBA Finals 2001, Allen Iverson versus the best team on the planet, the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. Undefeated in the playoffs, immortal, unshakable, untouchable, until he showed up. Game 1, No one gave the Sixers a chance. It was supposed to be a formality, a scheduled blowout, but Iverson had other plans. In the first half, he was uncontrollable. 30 points, insane crossovers, impossible floaters, steals, screams. Fire. He was on fire. Nobody could stop him. So Phil Jackson threw in a surprise. Tyronn Lue, the only one quick enough to keep up, and in the fourth quarter, it worked. Iverson didn't score a single point. They shut him down. The game went to overtime, but just when it looked like the Lakers had tamed him, the beast came back. In overtime, Iverson scored 7 of the team's 13 points. But the play that went down in history was a masterpiece. He broke Lue with a step back, hit the jumper, and without saying a word, he stepped over him. The most iconic step over of all time, it was street poetry, a symbol of defiance, the ultimate underdog statement. Iverson finished that game with 48 points, 6 assists, and 5 steals against the most feared machine in the NBA. Philadelphia won that game, the only game the Lakers lost that entire postseason. In that moment, Allen Iverson became an absolute legend. A year later, everything had changed. The Sixers had deflated, injuries were relentless, and the relationship with Larry Brown was once again on the verge of collapse. First-round exit, and once more, trade rumors swirled. The media swarmed him like vultures. And in that context, chaos, pressure, sadness, Allen exploded. It was a regular press conference until someone asked about his practices, and that's when he dropped the line that became immortal. Practice? We're talking about practice, not a game. Not a game. Practice.
Even practice?
Practice.
All right.
We talking about practice?
He laughed, but he was shattered inside. What almost no one knew was that he had just buried his best friend, gunned down in the street, that he was grieving, that the trial for the murder had just begun, that he hadn't slept, that he thought he was about to be traded, and the only question he got was about skipping practice. It was a cry of pain disguised as sarcasm, a catharsis the NBA turned into a meme, but it had deep roots because, yeah, Iverson hated to practice, but every time he stepped on the court, he gave his life, literally. As he once said, "I might miss practice, but I die in the games, I break myself from a team, and that should count for something." After the emotional peak of 2001, the wear and tear began. Iverson never stopped playing through injuries. His ankles were wrecked, his back was tight, his fingers swollen like sausages. Sometimes he couldn't even tie his shoes without help, but he still showed up always. The problem was, his body started saying enough, and so did the franchise. They couldn't surround him with talent. His teammates were guys who didn't even average 12 points a game. The system no longer worked, and he started to feel alone again. Even so, he kept delivering insane performances, 60 points against Orlando, steals, threes, impossible layups, but he was a lone warrior fighting against time, the media, and his own past. In 2006, the Sixers finally traded him. He went to Denver, then Detroit, Memphis, and a brief return to Philly, more for love than for his level of play. He wasn't the same anymore, but Iverson never apologized for who he was because everything he did it his way. And even if the ending wasn't epic, his story was already written in fire. Allen Iverson didn't just break ankles, he broke the mold. Before him, NBA players looked like executives in shorts, clean-cut, shaved, no tattoos, suit and tie. After him, cornrows, bling, backwards caps, and the full rap aesthetic crashed into the league. Iverson was the first to wear visible tattoos during a game, the first to wear a shooting sleeve, not for an injury, but as part of his style. The first to stand up to Commissioner David Stern and say, "I'm not going to change who I am just to play in this league." He didn't adapt to the NBA. The NBA had to adapt to him, and that made a lot of people uncomfortable. That's why they invented the mandatory dress code. Because Allen, with his street look, made conservative executives nervous, but on the other side, the kids loved him. Everyone wanted to be like him. He had street cred, attitude, and authenticity. He was the closest thing to a rapper playing basketball. And that realness made him an icon. You wanted to be a rebel with a cause, you braided your hair like Iverson, you wanted to show the world you didn't care about the system's rules, you tattooed your arm like Iverson, you wanted to be a star without betraying your roots. Allen was the blueprint. He changed the game without ever changing who he was. But not everything was epic. There was chaos too, and it was spicy. In 1997, just after being named Rookie of the Year, he got caught in a car going 150 kilometers per hour with weed and a gun inside. He ended up with probation and 100 hours of community service. Legally, it wasn't a big deal, but for the media, it was a bombshell. Then came the rap phase. Under the name Jules, he recorded an album called 40 Bars, packed with controversial lyrics, misogyny, homophobia, raw aggression. The NBA shut it down fast. David Stern sat him down, scolded him like a kid, and asked him to rewrite the album. Iverson apologized, renamed it Misunderstood, and never officially released it. More drama, his system for recruiting women at games. He had a squad of 10 people posted around the arena, handing out cards to invite women to post-game private parties. It was like a covert operation, James Bond style, but for seduction, and according to his friend Questlove from The Roots, if you weren't careful, he'd steal your girl in under 5 minutes. Iverson's life off the court was as chaotic as it was spectacular. Endless parties, tight bonds with rappers, sleepless nights, but none of that ever kept him off the court. He still played, he always played. He played hurt, he played drunk, he played with his soul. For years, people said Allen Iverson went broke, that he lost everything, that he blew through the $200+ million he made from contracts and endorsements, that he was completely ruined. No house, no car, not a dime to his name. And yeah, he did spend like a legend. He bought cars like they were candy, rolled with an entourage of over 50 people, handed out watches, clothes, straight up cash. Once he traveled with so many friends, he needed 2 private jets. Literally, one for him, one for the crew. But the story that he was broke, that's a myth. Cosmic smoke. What most people didn't know is that he had a secret Reebok trust fund, part of his lifetime contract, a $32 million trust he can't even touch until 2030. On top of that, he still gets paid $800,000 a year from that same deal. Iverson may have spent recklessly, but he was never completely foolish, and he was never poor. The bankruptcy rumor was just media noise. Good for clicks, bad on facts. Today he lives peacefully, no over-the-top luxuries, surrounded by family and real friends. He doesn't need anything more because he already won everything, not in titles but in respect. What Iverson built can't be bought. It's something you feel, something you remember, something you shout. Allen Iverson was the player who refused to practice, but when the buzzer sounded, he wanted to die on the court, the one who skipped workouts but played through 9 injuries, the guy who hated the gym but dropped 46 points with a wrecked hip. He wasn't a champion, but he inspired millions. Iverson was the first rock star of modern basketball. He changed the culture, the style, the attitude. He opened the door so players like Russell Westbrook, Ja Morant, and Kyrie Irving could be themselves. He was the blueprint, the DNA, the NBA's first face tattoo. And though he never won a ring, his 2001 season was an act of war. He led the worst offensive team ever to the finals, almost all alone. Every game felt like his last. Every crossover was a scream for freedom. Every play, a kick to the establishment. He was the only MVP under 6 feet 1 inch, the lightest, the most doubted, and yet the most feared, because what Iverson had wasn't measured in pounds or inches, it was measured in soul. That's why every time a skinny kid steps on the court and dares to dominate against taller, stronger, bigger players, Iverson is right there, because Allen Iverson wasn't a role model. He was a sign that you can come from nothing, screw up 1,000 times, lose almost everything, and still leave a legacy that can never be erased. And the big question is, what's your favorite Iverson moment? The crossover on Jordan, the step over on Ty Lue, or that iconic "we talking about practice"? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. This was Hoop Secrets, and I'll see you next time.